Good morning, South Florida, and welcome to the Frost Jazz Hour here on WDNA 88.9 FM and WDNA.org on the internet. I'm your host today, Tim Smith. Welcome to a hot, steamy summer day here in Miami. But the music inside is going to be really, really cool for you today. We'd like to welcome our studio audience. Thank you for being here. We're at WDNA Studios is here on Coral Way, 2921 Coral Way, on Thursdays at 11. Please join us. Frost School of Music, University of Miami, proudly presents the best in jazz. Every time I'm on here, I brag about the quality of what we're putting up here, but today is really something to brag about. One of my colleagues, John Hart, who's the head of the jazz guitar program at the Frost School of Music, and is one of the best, most wonderful jazz guitar players in the world, and we're so happy to have him not only as a faculty member, but as our guest today on the Frost Jazz Hour. So with the best things in life for free, please welcome John Hart. John Hart. And John will be coming over to join me. Beautiful, beautiful. Playing by yourself.
Couldn't find anybody else. Do I need to use it?
Yes, you need to use it.
I can't hear it, though.
It's on. It's just not real loud, but it should be fine.
Yeah, I tried. I couldn't find anybody else. So.
Well, it's summer.
I was supposed to get my kids were supposed to play.
And
They're too old for that.
You have
so
to pay
Pop's
them.
Pop's got to take over.
Well, it's funny. The last 4 or 5 weeks, we've had several of your students playing guitar. From Tim Jago, Brian Dubrow, Diego Melgar. And
right. Yeah,
every time they come in and sound good, I always bring it up and say, you must have had a good teacher.
Yeah, it's a great group. Definitely.
You do. The guitar studio here, for those of you listening, is remarkable. And it's John has recruited some great students, then built some incredible students out of it. And they're versatile and they're energetic and they play great. And, it's just, we don't have to ever worry about our guitar players.
Yeah. I've been blessed to be able to really find some great students in the 7 years I've been here. So,
well, you got here.
Keep it going.
You got here as a student, right as I left as a student. I graduated in '79.
Right.
You were
I
getting
arrived
here.
in 1979.
And the guitar professor then was a gentleman named Randall Dollahan,
Right.
who's a dear friend of mine and still lives in the area. I know he was your teacher. And it's very much like, I feel like in the bass thing with Don being here for so long, you just took over and are building and making it even better. So we're really thrilled to have you
Well, I was
here.
honored to be able to take over for Randall, who left a great legacy in 35 years and so many great students. And
Well, obviously, your resume, you moved to New York,
Right.
and one of the names on your resume, there's a lot of them that are heroes of mine, but one is Jack McDuff, and I wanted to
Right.
ask you about that, because playing guitar in a band, an organ trio, is a whole different can of worms there, because there's no bass player.
Right.
And was Jack playing kicking bass with pedals, or was he playing left hand?
well, the bass is played with the left hand, and then usually the pedals are used. They play the pedals constantly, but they use them to kind of fatten up the bass notes. So if he's playing a blues in F, he's going to be walking the lines with his left hand, but he might be pumping on an F.
Right.
And sometimes he'd play actual individual notes and stuff, but the pedals are a very important part of the organ. And also just be able to get, there's a lot of, people cross over from piano to play organ, and the technique of walking the bass line and stuff, it's not that difficult for a good pianist, but to be able to get the sound, especially the bass, I think that's like the real organ aficionados, to get that really fat, big bass sound.
And the guys that are great, I've worked with some great organists, and they're constantly doing stuff on the instrument itself, changing the percussion, changing things.
Right. Yeah,
so it's not just like, if you take a piano player that goes, well, I can play the piano, I'm just going to sit down and play organ. Sometimes it doesn't work. Because
it's an orchestra in itself. And McDuff started out, he's from Champaign, Illinois, and he started out as a bass player. So he was a bass player. He was a professional bass player. So his bass was amazing, But organ and guitar blend really easily. Also, so it's very common. That's why the organ groups always have guitar, and it's very, you can almost play anything on a guitar. It sounds good playing with an organ.
Well, I think that's one of the ways George Benson got his start, too.
Right. Well, McDuff started out George Benson, and Pat Martino. That was his first gig, so he has that. Mark Whitfield also, and Grant Green's first record has features Jack McDuff. So he's very very. Big figure, not only as in his own right, but in his influence in the jazz guitar world.
Absolutely. Well, you stepped into something wonderful there.
Yeah.
That's great. Want to hear a lot of music today, but also wanted to ask you about you keep a very, very active performing and recording career, which I don't know about other schools, but in our jazz department at Frost, a lot of us make records, a lot of us play gigs, and I think it's really, really important.
Yeah. I think it's important, and to be able to impart that kind of experience on the students rather than just straight pedagogy. It's like, well, this is, I've been doing this, and if you do it this way, maybe you can get some gigs too.
I love it. Sounds good. What would you like to play for me next?
I'm going to play "Embraceable You" by George Gershwin.
All right. John Hart. Let me give you a heads up what's going on in the coming weeks. Next week is the 4th of July, so we will not have a live show here in our studio, but we're going to replay a recent show that we did with the great Hal Rowland and his group, and it was just a remarkable day, and we're really honored to be able to play that one again for you. On July 11th, Ben Beal and his band. Ben is a recent graduate with his master's from our program. He's a great piano player and vocalist. Then on the 18th, Lucas Apostolaris will bring in an ensemble. Lucas is a multi-talented arranger, drummer. July 25th, one of John's recent graduates from his program, Brian Dubrow, will be back here with the trio. And then on August 1st, I think a great mutual friend of John and I, Lindsay Blair, will be bringing in a duo called Duo Brubeck featuring Lindsay. And in coming months, we're going to have the great Ron Miller will be here, and he was a very important teacher at the University of Miami's Frost School of Music in the old days. Big influence on Pat Metheny. Certainly influenced me. I'm sure he influenced John too. Just great composer, great piano player. So we've got a lot of good stuff to listen for and to look forward to. Here's George Gershwin's Embraceable You. John Hart with Embraceable You. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to the Frost Jazz Hour. Our guest today is the amazing John Hart, one of our illustrious professors at the Frost School of Music. And again, the Frost Jazz Hour, every week we try to bring you the very, very best in jazz with the South Florida flavor, University of Miami flavor. Sometimes it's student groups, sometimes it's faculty, special guests, alumni, and some of them are all of the above. John is a graduate of the program, is also an alumni of the program and a great guest artist as well as a faculty member, and so we're glad to have him. He's going to do a beautiful medley now of a couple of real special tunes. Would you say this is directly out of the Duke Ellington world, or?
I guess it's "In My Solitude" and "Caravan."
Caravan, right? So it's from that era, and I can't wait to hear what you do with these two. John Hart on the jazz guitar. John Hart with an amazing medley, In My Solitude and Caravan. It's something that was really obviously a reharmonization of John's, but those songs, Duke Ellington wrote those songs in the 1930s, and we still play them today, and they still hold up.
They were very advanced sounding when they came out in the 1930s.
You know, Billie Holiday had a recording of In My Solitude, and then, of course, Caravan was a famous feature for his whole band. But to think, when we use the word standard, as musicians, we use the word standard to, I've heard other people call them evergreens or whatever. Those songs, they hold up no matter what. And then you add your genius reharm to that, and it's an amazing thing. Imagine creating something that 90 years after the fact, we're still enjoying it.
Yeah, they're great vehicles. In My Solitude is actually a study in simplicity. Almost such a simple tune, beautiful. It's in D flat, which was a lot of the Ellington and Strayhorn tunes were in D flat. They just found that key particularly resonant. And then Caravan, of course, was composed by the trombonist Juan Teasel, and it really sounds when you hear the original with the muted trombone playing the melody, it's very slow and very moody, and just it captures the Caravan. Then, of course, the jazzers kind of take it, and they take it up tempo, and it's a great vehicle to be able to,
it's
kind of play
that you would
high energy and stuff. So I try to combine a little bit. I try to get a little bit of the mood and a little bit of the energy and all of it.
Outstanding, especially to be doing it by yourself, John.
Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned D flat. It's funny, when I worked with Boots Randolph for many years, and we did a lot of his ballads in D flat.
Yeah,
and it was because it would put the saxophone, the tenor saxophone, in a register that was at the bottom of its range, and it was very thick and beautiful. Right. For ballads, he preferred that, and like I said, Ellington did. A lot of the guys did.
Yeah. Jack McDuff loved D flat too.
Really?
He played blues in D flat. There are about 2 or 3 blues in D flat in his book, or maybe even more. It's a great key. Yeah.
Well, there's another name on your resume who is also a friend of mine, who I wanted to get your take on Chris Potter. I first met Chris when. After I'd graduated from college, I was in Charlotte for a little while, which is my hometown, and he was from Columbia, South Carolina. And his dad would bring him up to this jazz club that we would play. And he was probably all of 13 years old, and he sounded like Charlie Parker already. And then one day he came up to me and he said, "Mr. Smith," and I said, "Yes, you can call me Tim." He goes, "Do you think I can play the piano between sets?" And I said, "What, do you just put headphones on?" He goes, "No, unless I'll bother somebody." And he sat to the piano. He was already great on the piano.
Yeah, he's a great piano player.
Who is this kid?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that could pick up an instrument and be able to play it.
But how did your experience with him come about?
I actually heard about him initially from my friend, great New York drummer, Andy Watson. He was playing me tapes of Chris when he was like 12 or 13, because they grew up together in Greenville. Well, I mean, Andy's a little bit older, different generation, but in Greenville, South Carolina. And then I met Chris when he came to New York when he was around 18, and we started playing a little bit. And then we ended up having a quartet that was together for about 7 years, toured all over country, and let me see, I played on 2 of Chris's records in the 90s, and we actually documented the quartet with one record that came out on Concord Records called Bridges. Well,
he's a genius talent, and one of those guys that we need to get down here for a visit again. I think he's been down a couple of times, but it's wonderful to have you here. Just a question, maybe the guitar players that are listening would already know this, but if you played Caravan again right now, would it be the same thing?
I could play it differently. I kind of worked out a few little things that were sort of arrangement, and stuff. But, if I improvised it, I could do completely different versions.
I teach a jazz history class to non-music majors, and part of my test, every test has the same first question, and it's jazz equals blank. And the question I'm looking for is improvisation.
Yeah.
And because and what I was hearing in you, I was just watching your hands, watching you play, and you're creating on the spot, and that's such an unbelievable art. Because this is off this subject, but I was watching an interview with Al Cooper, the great keyboard player and producer, and he was talking about the band Leonard Skinner, and he said there was not one note of improvisation on any of their records that he produced. That every solo, everything was worked out exactly the same every time. And I didn't realize that as I listened to those records. But what we're doing here, that the thing that I hope our audience, our listening audience, and our live audience understands, that your brain is up there working. Yeah. You aren't just playing a bunch of things that you have worked out. Your ears are triggering things.
Yeah, I'm trying to find. Sometimes I try something, it might not work. Necessarily. Herbie Hancock talks about that. He says he makes mistakes all the time. He says if he's not making a mistake, it means he's not
going
taking
for
chances.
That's right.
He's not going for it and trying to find something new.
Well, this is such an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
The music is beautiful. What would you like to play next?
I don't know. What do you want to hear? Can we get a request from the audience? I'll play some.
There's got to be a request from someone here.
What do you want to hear, Tim?
I want to hear you play The Nearness of You.
Nearness of You. Okay.
That's one of my favorite songs. Here's John Hart with The Nearness of You, a great song.
Carmichael.
Do what?
Hoagie Carmichael.
Hoagie Carmichael, that's right. Most of this great jazz music wasn't just written for us jazz musicians to play over. These were great songs. Many of them were huge hits of the day with great lyrics. And so as we learn these songs, it's really important to learn what the song's about. You know, The Nearness of You it's not the pale moon that excites me, that thrills or delights me. Oh no, it's the nearness of you. So we'll hear that, I'm sure, in John's rendition. Be careful what you request. That was magnificent. Unbelievable. I'm going to steal a bunch of that from my arrangement. It's great. So what do you have coming up? Your wife told me you're going to be doing some more recording soon.
Yeah. I'm been doing a bunch of gigs this summer. I have a new CD out right now, Crop Circles.
Great.
On Steeplechase, Dick Oates, the great Dick Oates, Quartet Dick Oates, Bill Mooring, and Andy Watson. I was just in New York about a week ago, and I'm playing some gigs, and I did a recording with the trumpet player John Snyder, who's the father of one of our students.
Yeah. Our stamp trumpet player, David Snyder.
David Snyder, which featured Joel Fromm and Larry Goldings.
Wow.
Andy Watson, and a guest appearance by Andy Bay, which is very special. And I'm going up to New York this weekend to record with the great veteran piano player Bill Mays, who I've known for many years, but never recorded with him. So excited about that. Back home, and then 2 weeks later, I'm doing a week tour with Brian Blade and a new band of his that I play in called Life Cycles. We're playing at the 2 nights at the Jazz Kitchen in Indianapolis, and then we're going to play 4 nights at the Blue Note in New York. And then we'll be on tour again in September around the States. And a new record coming out from that band, too. So.
Brian Blade is one of the great drummers in the world, and one of our other faculty members, Melvin Butler, is a member of his fellowship band.
Yes,
that's a great connection for us to have. And,
yeah.
Well, glad you're staying busy. I mean, obviously you're a world-class player, and you're getting to do what you need to be doing. And for any of the guitar players listening, this is... John's here. I mean, he may be busy like this, but he's here. He teaches his students, every week. They have hands-on experience, and what I see our guitar players doing is coming in as very good guitar players and leaving as wonderful guitar players. And so make sure you keep the Frost School of Music in mind. We have an amazing guitar studio.
Great guitar program.
And
if I do say so myself.
Well, it has been for a long time, but right now it's all the rest of us are jealous of you, John. So it's a great program. We have great bass players too. So
yes,
I'm not complaining about my bass players.
Great school, of course.
And again, this is if our dean here right now was here, Shelley Berg, if he's here with us today, he would say the same thing. He's still recording. He's still out chasing, selling records, doing performances. We don't want to be a school of dinosaurs.
Of course not.
We're out there trying to do great music and be an inspiration, not only one-on-one with our students, but then when they hit play on their music and hear what we do, we hope that's an inspiration to them also. We've got a few minutes left. I would love to hear another song of yours that I've actually played with you once. I don't know if you remember it, but a long time ago. You have an incredible version of Here's That Rainy Day.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Will you play that for us?
I'll play that, yeah.
Unless you had something else in mind.
No, I'll play that.
Great.
This is from one of my records, this arrangements from a trio record that came out a few years ago on Zoho, same label as your new record's on. The record's called Exit from Brooklyn. This is my arrangement of Here's That Rainy Day.
This is a great song by Jimmy McHugh and Jimmy Van Heusen, whose real name, for those of you keeping score, is Chester Babcock. He didn't like that name, and he was walking by a store that was selling Van Heusen shirts, and he said, "That's my name, Jimmy Van Heusen." True. That is true. I wouldn't lie to our radio audience, John. We've had a wonderful time today here on the Frost Jazz Hour. Our wonderful jazz guitar professor, John Hart, playing solo and playing so remarkably. Thank you to our audience for being here. And here's John to take us out with Here's That Rainy Day.